I tell you what, Facebook is against us today, folks. It is Wednesday, which means Wen and Wit are coming to you live. And the Rooster. Hey there, and I am having a heck of a time getting my sister this video here. See if it works. Oh,
Huh?
oh, I tell you. I think maybe you guys wouldn't believe us if we said every time
That we
that we
practice?
don't we practice because I have OCD, so I have to go through the same order of operations every single time
Mm-hmm.
to get this up and running. So we always go live, we always check to make sure it's working, and that's like within 10 minutes of going live. And then you hear my rooster hanging out with the roosters today.
What's
Oh
funny
my
is it
gosh,
always works when we practice. It
no
always is
problems.
flawless. If only you guys could see us like 5 minutes ago. But here we are.
Here we are. Try three. Third time's a charge. Third time charges you.
Yeah. Well, at least it takes the nerves off. All the technical difficulties makes
uh,
me a little less nervous about today's topic. So anyway,
I love it. Yep, more rooster. I love it because a lot of people are super nervous about going live on Facebook. Like, this is a thing that people have all kinds of hangups about, right? And like, here we are, just making a
I
fool of
see
ourselves
why.
every Wednesday. Every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday. Yep.
So
It's
we're
good to be
glad you guys are
consistent.
here. Oh man, we've been here for 21 Wednesdays. Maybe not 21 Wednesdays in a row, that's for sure, because Facebook likes to be jerks to us sometimes and we can't make it work. But if you are wondering why the heck we're here on Wednesdays, because I'm seeing some new names popping up here, we do a little show, a little chat, if you will. People maybe watch Facebook more than they actually watch television these days. So I think that's funny. But we call this "What Do We Know with Wen and Wit," and it's a little bit of play on words because we come here and we bring a subject to you guys and we chat about it, and we hope to bring education, inspiration, and perspective. And we hope we do that for you guys. We love for you to weigh in on the conversation. But the truth of the matter is, we're sharing what we know, but we also are saying, what do we know? We don't know all the answers, right?
Hmm.
But that's why we come here. We're trying to shed light on certain conversations and help, bring um, hard conversations to the surface, which is what we're going to try to do today with a tough subject here. And again, disclaimer, you guys, we're not experts on anything we talk about. We really don't actually know what the heck we're talking about most of the time. We're just offering our experience, what we've learned, what we do know. And sometimes we kind of come to know a little bit more as we chat back and forth here. And we love you guys weighing in. We would love to know what you guys want to see us talk about. So please,
Hmm.
please pop in a topic. It could be anything, any old thing.
Literally anything.
And yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll do some research. We'll come up with some perspective for you guys. But yeah, we want a challenge. So please pop. I'm gonna eat my words, I'm sure. But please pop in a topic for us to talk about. And if you guys are new, I am Wendy. That is my name. I'm the Wen part of this equation. And I am a wife of 11 years and a mom of three babes. And I have three dogs and a whole bunch of other animals. I live on 84 acres. I am a business owner, that rooster, for one.
It's one of them.
I am a business owner. I'm a blogger. I'm an author and a speaker. And I live in Middle Tennessee. Who
And
are you?
I am Whitney, and I am a mom to Dylan and a baby on the way, my fur baby Rizzo. I'm also a small business owner and a wife, and I live in Northern California.
Ooh, so we're actually meeting in the middle of the country too. We always like to say that. Well,
Yep.
Kim is enjoying us. She says that we make her laugh and we
Oh,
talk about great
good.
topics. So that's the point. That's why we're here, to make you laugh and give you a little entertainment for your hump day. I'm
Yeah.
going to shamelessly plug myself here, you guys. That sounded strange, but you know what I mean. I have a blog, and it's
Keep it
Gaining My
PG.
Perspective, gainingmyperspective.com. Go check it out, you guys. I blog about once a week, and I have a newsletter that goes out once a month, and you could subscribe to both. preferably you subscribe to my newsletter. Give it a little look-see. My goal, again, is to just further this platform of bringing perspective, inspiration, education, get you thinking, pose some questions to make your brain work. GainingMyPerspective.com. You can also link to our YouTube channel through my blog to catch all of our 20 episodes we've already done, see what we talk about. But yeah, today we're talking about pregnancy loss, which is going to be a tricky, touchy subject. The concept is, what do you do when the bottom falls out and your worst fears are recognized? So audience participation question. Have you ever personally experienced the loss of a pregnancy at any point? It might have been early on, it might have been later in the pregnancy, or a full-term pregnancy loss. We'd love to hear your story, because I have a sneaking suspicion. I don't know what's going on with that rooster. It's just going to lighten the whole
topic.
Mood. Can you hear it as much as I can hear it?
Oh, yes.
Just maybe that rooster is going through a pregnancy loss with his hen. I don't know.
I was going to say.
I hear ya.
Good time, good time.
Today. I don't know if you get that, but we're on our game today. Okay, Kim says yes. Erica says yes. Okay, I had a sneaking suspicion that this would be a topic that might strike a chord with a lot of people. So I am forcing my dear sister, putting her on the hot seat a little bit here, because I have not lost a pregnancy myself. But my sister did, and so she's going to sit in the hot seat today, and we're just going to do a little Q&A. Please feel free to pop your questions in here as we roll. But what do you want to tell us a little bit? Wow, Chelsea, we have lots. Chelsea lost a baby.
I bet.
Erica, early on in their pregnancies.
So before we hop into questions, I just wanted to say, this is understandably a very vulnerable topic. I want to extend the olive branch that if anyone has experienced loss and doesn't want to say it in the comments, feel free to reach out to either one of us. Totally. Specifically, if you want to talk to me. I only bring that up because recently I had my 20-week ultrasound with this current babe. And I thought about posting on social media about it. And then I was so scared and I was so self-conscious about it. I didn't know if I should do it. And finally, I got up the courage to share a very candid, vulnerable post. And I'm so glad that I did. And I shared that with Wendy. I had a bunch of people reach out to me and say, thank you for sharing a positive success story after a loss, because so many people feel like, they can't go forward after it. So that's why we decided to talk about it today. It's not to make light of it. It's more to shed some light on the experience and the fact that you can move forward in your life after such a situation. So that's why we kind of brought it up today. So hopefully that's totally okay.
And you guys, we're big on books and personal development. We talk about that all the time. And I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. If you know her work, she talks about vulnerability is the number one superpower we have as humans to connect. And so Wit is being brave in her vulnerability in an attempt to connect the dots for all of us, right? That again, to shed light on the fact that you're not the only one. This is a very common thing that happens. So we're going to walk through, but if you want to keep any questions private or whatever, we will respect that and would love to hear from you privately as well. So Whit, why don't you just kind of jump in by telling us a little bit about your experience, when and what happened?
Okay. So I'm going to try and just treat it like a journalistic perspective. That's my background. I'm going to try and keep emotions out, hopefully. I had a totally normal pregnancy with Dylan. So my firstborn, we literally, the very first time I got off birth control and we had sex, I conceived. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is like almost like the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, holy crap, I guess we're moving forward with this, right? And then it went out on without a hitch. I took time in between Dylan and getting pregnant the second time because I thought, oh, it was so easy And I knew that Wendy didn't have any trouble conceiving. She had no issues with her 3 pregnancies. I knew my mom had no issues conceiving with Wendy and me. So I kind of thought, when we're ready to pull the trigger, it'll just happen. And then we tried in December of this last year, and it didn't take, nothing happened. And then in January, nothing happened. And I was I know it's 2 months, and people have obviously gone a lot longer than that on their fertility journey. But it was really disheartening to be like, why is it not happening? Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I conceive this time? And anyway, in February, we did conceive. And so because of those 2 months, I know it's small for some people, but to me, it was 60 days of like feeling like a failure. We had a positive pregnancy test. And so Chris and I immediately planned everything out. We were talking about, taking maternity photos, how we were going to tell our parents. Like, we instantly just fixated on all of what our future was going to look like. And then about a week after that, I had what's called a chemical pregnancy. So it's too early on to be qualified as a miscarriage, I guess. So it's just cells. So they call it a chemical pregnancy. But basically, it's a miscarriage that happens really, really early on. And it was devastating.
I watched a movie, a documentary when I was just before I found out I was pregnant with my first. So this was quite a while ago because she's about to turn 8. It's called Babies. Have you watched it? Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's a great documentary about babies and all, like the development of babies in the womb, but then also the different kinds of babies all over the world and how babies are born and, in all these different conditions, depending on where you're, where in the world you're born. But it said something on there that stuck out as so interesting to me that, and I don't mean to skew the statistics, I should have looked it up, but it said up to 50% of pregnancies actually are miscarried, but a lot of them are missed because people are, if you're not trying and paying attention as diligently as you were, you may have just experienced what you would have perceived as like an extra painful period. Would you say that could have, like, if you were not paying super close attention, that might have gone by as like, that was a little bit of a funky period, maybe a couple days later, whatever. Which I think when you're not paying attention, or maybe when you are irregular, you don't know, that you had a chemical pregnancy or a miscarriage, early miscarriage, if you tend to be irregular, or if your periods are really dramatically, heavy or really painful. So that was really interesting to me. I had no idea that it could even be as common as that. And I think that's probably even more common than people expect that it is. But, I have to point out, I just saw there's 2 comments in here about ectopic pregnancies where the mom lost their fallopian tube due to that. 2 people watching. That's really interesting too. So I didn't mean to digress from your story. I just thought, again, it's a very common experience, and maybe even or maybe someone who doesn't realize that they have had a chemical pregnancy very well could have had a chemical pregnancy. So tell us a little bit more, Whit, as much as you're willing to share, about the experience, like in real time, in terms of, painful, emotional, some of the thoughts that you were going through. What was that like?
Well, I will say that what they have reported statistically for people who are aware that they were pregnant, it's 1 in 4. But you're right. 1 in 4 people experience, 1 in 4 women experience a miscarriage.
So not 1 in 4 pregnancies, but 1 in 4 women?
Yes.
Okay.
1 in 4 women experience a pregnancy loss. So that is even under skewed because, like you said, some women don't realize that they are pregnant. And that is a tough one for me. I actually wrote that in the notes because I was told that by my doctor that, oh, are you sure it wasn't just a missed period or a late period? I can't speak for everyone. I know it's hard to talk on that particular topic because some women have really horrendous periods and some women have really light periods. And so for me, I tend to run kind of on the lighter side of things. So there was no mistaking that this was drastically different.
Sure.
Even if I wasn't paying attention, I feel like it would have been different because, not to be too graphic, but it was big, like golf ball size clots that I was passing.
Wow. Okay.
So I know that some women, you know, when they're ovulating, when they're on their period, they do have fluctuations in the size of their, you know, menstrual flow. But it was shocking to see. So that part was something that was very, very different. And then there was a lot of blood, which is more than I had experienced previously. And the cramping I could equate to labor-like cramping, and I only could because of what I experienced with Dylan, you know, going through labor
right
with him. I've had bad period cramps. This was like next level, keeled over, nothing feeling better, no pain meds helping reduce the tensing, you know, of your stomach and all of that. So who knows, maybe some people could misconstrue or not pay attention to, you know, their cycle and stuff. But for me, it was very, very different. And it was really hard to hear when I felt so validated in a positive pregnancy test that my doctor was kind of saying like, well, it probably could, you know, it could have just been a late period. And, you know, we'll test your HCG levels. And, you know, it's almost like I had to prove that it was happening, which didn't feel great. But then on the flip side, they must see this all the time. You know, they must see miscarriages all the time, and it's their job to not be emotional about it.
You know, when I went in with my water breaking with Gage, they were like, your water probably didn't break. I was like, look,
right.
I don't break my water every day, but they were like, we're not calling any doctors in until we confirm. So different, but totally funny how they just are like, well, maybe you're wrong. So they really must see it all the time that people are getting it wrong.
Right. And then after they did a urine and a blood test, they were like, oh yeah, you do have HCG in your system, but it's much lower than it should be for how far along I was. Like, I guess it starts out at a really low amount, and then the next day it doubles, and then it triples, and then it's, you know, when you're like 6 weeks into your pregnancy, you should have over 1,000 units or whatever of HCG. And when I went in, I had like 10 units. So it was obvious that there was HCG, but it was also obvious that it was not viable in any sense of the word.
Sure.
So that's more of the logistics side of thing. But I did feel like people were trying to minimize my experience. Doctors, people who hadn't experienced it just because they didn't know what to say. So they say like, well, at least it was early on, or, you know, at least you didn't get too far in the planning. But the thing is you're mourning the loss of what your life would have looked like. It's more than just mourning the 5 seconds that you were pregnant, or, you know, the week or the whatever. It's the whole thing. It's your whole future. So on the emotional side of things, it felt like I was a failure. Obviously very painful, you know, mentally and physically. I was embarrassed, which is unfair because there's nothing I could have done. There's nothing to be embarrassed about, but I felt like, how come some people can carry, you know, no problem, and then what's wrong with me that this happened? Denial from both me and Chris. I know when I started bleeding, what happens is usually you don't have any bleeding, and then I wiped after I went to pee, and I had a little blood in the tissue, and I'm like, is that implantation bleeding? What is it? And then it just started to get way, way, way more throughout the day. And so I called Chris and I said, I think I'm having a miscarriage. And he was like, no, there's no way. Like, it's probably nothing. And I'm like, it seems substantial, you know? And so it took us a while to be like, oh my gosh, this isn't going to happen, you know? And that reality was pretty depressing for sure. Yeah. So I did a lot of ugly face crying in the bathtub for a long time. But I will say, in light of that, I was very thankful in the sadness that Dylan was such a healthy pregnancy. And I was also thankful that I didn't need a procedure. for the miscarriage. I know a lot of women do, and I've heard it is not a pleasant experience whatsoever. So
Sure.
there was some stuff that was good, I guess.
Well, hey, perspective, right? There's always,
Yeah.
we just were hearing about that at church on Sunday, that your mindset, when people are like, oh, it's just been a bad year. And the pastor was like, I would challenge that. It's been a bad, like only bad things happened. That's not true. In 365 days, only bad things happened. Or it was a bad day. Oh, only bad things happened today. You didn't think one good thought. You didn't laugh one time, so there's always another side, or positives, or
Totally.
good things, even though we're not here to make light and say you should be positive about it. Not at all. That's not what I'm getting at. But I can appreciate that there is that silver lining of, I remember even when my puppy died, one of my first thoughts was, thank God this wasn't my 10-year-old dog. Like, there's those moments of like perspective almost immediately, even in grief, of like,
Sure.
I would be devastated to lose my 10-year-old relationship with this dog, versus a puppy I had 1 week. Not to minimize, but again,
Sure.
just poorly trying to relate right now.
I appreciate lightening the mood a little bit with the death of a dog.
You guys have to know, like, this is so hard for me to be serious. Not because I'm not being serious, but like, I'm the one that I bring lightness to things.
Right.
And so I'm like, when you're having a hard time, I'm going to totally commiserate with you. But I'm also probably going to make a joke. So you need to like make sure that you know that about me. If you ever call me in a sadness, I'm going to like make you laugh.
Totally.
Okay. Back to the question. How did this affect your desire or ability to get pregnant again?
Well, mostly it made me realize how much I really did want this child. I think because getting pregnant with Dylan was so easy, I was a little bit nervous to dive back in, because I'm like, well, once I dive in, it's going to happen. And then when I hit this obstacle, I totally was like, oh my gosh, I really do want a second child. Like I am not scared of not having a second child anymore. I am scared that I won't get a second child. So that perspective shift happened.
Totally.
Before I conceived with this babe that miscarried, I was tracking ovulation. I was taking my temperature, with a basal thermometer. I was being very intentional, and Chris and I were planning out, everything about how to conceive. After I had a miscarriage, I didn't even want to talk about it. I didn't want to track it. I didn't want to think about it. I wasn't even sure how much time I would need before I could like trick myself emotionally into getting back into it. But I knew that I needed to get back to being okay mentally before diving in. So for me, I needed time, but I didn't know how much time that was. I just knew I didn't want to fixate on it, because I needed to grieve it and figure out what I needed to do for myself to like be okay,
Sure. How long did it take you between miscarrying and getting pregnant again?
So really quickly, actually, it was one full cycle. So I miscarried, and because another positive perspective, I miscarried early on enough that it didn't mess up my traditional cycle, which has always been very, very, very regular. So even though I wasn't intentional, I knew in the back of my mind when I was ovulating. So I had a period after the miscarriage, which they recommended that you do just for your health. They want to make sure that you're able to menstruate again. And then that next month I didn't get a period. So, I was like, okay, well, here we go again. Like, I hope I'm okay to do this again to myself physically and mentally. So it didn't mess things up too bad there. Doctors actually told me that once you have a miscarriage, your body is more likely to conceive quickly again, because your body already thinks, your body already basically thinks that it has a baby. So it's kind of grasping for the next thing to come along. So I don't know the statistics on it, but most women conceive pretty quickly after a miscarriage if they're sexually active. So
if they're not struggling with
news.
Infertility otherwise.
Yes. If this was an isolated incident, their body is usually prepped and ready to conceive the next sperm egg combo.
Sure. On that note, I just want to put this out here for anyone who watches a video. I think it would be very valuable if any of you would be willing to be a guest speaker if you have struggled with prolonged infertility, because neither of us did. But I know that's like a massive issue. And I if anyone is willing, please send us a message, because we'd love to tackle that, not next week, but like in time. So let us know. That just came to my mind, but I feel like that would be a powerful thing to talk about as well. How is this pregnancy? You're how far along now? 21, 22 weeks?
24. 24 weeks.
Jeez.
I know, it's flying by.
Craziness. Okay, how is this pregnancy different from the first pregnancy, having lost one between?
Every step, every day has been terrifying. I wish that I had something like cool to say about that. I've had lots of anxiety. It's hard to pretend it didn't happen, and not that you should, but it's hard to just act as if you don't know that could happen, because your reality has been shattered from that, experience. I say this lightly, but, I literally check for blood every time I pee. And it's funny because I'm like, okay, Whitney, you're like well beyond the stage of that being likely. At this point, the things that can happen would be complications, no longer a miscarriage, so to speak. But I'm still like, I like get nervous when I go pee, because I'm like, man, what if? So that kind of sucks. And
I felt that way, even having not lost a pregnancy. I was always nervous. Always. Yeah.
It's just
I can imagine it's through the roof. Yeah.
It's so hard to be the carrier of the child, because you go so long without feeling anything. And then when you do you feel it enough? Is it too much? Is it, and so even just outside of the bleeding part, it's very hard emotionally. It's taxing. I have mentioned this to you, Wendy, but it's really hard to get attached in this pregnancy. With Dylan, I was attached because the idea of it, I didn't know what it would be like. It was my first kid, all of those things. And then I had no reason to believe otherwise. So I was very excited. This time I don't want to get attached, just in case. And that's a sucky feeling. I wish that I could be excited, especially because we're pretty sure this is our last child. So it's my last time being pregnant, and I'm dreading it instead of really relishing in the experience. And I know I'll regret that later on in my life, but I don't know what to do otherwise.
Sure.
And then also, of course, because God likes to play tricks on us, I have an anterior placenta this time, and that means it's in the front of my belly, and it cushions a lot of the baby's kicks and movements. So until the baby's bigger, it's harder to feel, especially concretely. Of course, everything I read was like, oh, well, when you have your second kid, you'll feel them almost immediately because you know what it feels like and all this. And I'm sitting here, again, 24 weeks. I just started feeling the baby last week. Everyone's asking me, whether they know I had a miscarriage or not. They're saying, like, are you feeling the baby? Is the baby moving? And I'm like, no, and I don't want to talk about it. Like, this is it's not okay. No. So that's just been funny. But I am feeling baby now, and it's great. So
that's good. Yeah, you'll be grateful for that probably at the end of the pregnancy when you're ready to like punch him back. You're like, oh my gosh, to get some of that cushioning.
Totally.
How has this experience changed or shaped you as a person? Pros and cons.
So it's given me perspective. Like we had said, I didn't realize it was so common. So that has given me perspective and a lot of empathy towards women I know. Gratitude for Dylan. I already love him to pieces, but he's such a precious little joy boy, and I can't imagine life without him. And I know that this pregnancy, being healthy and heading in that direction, is just going to bring me so much more joy. I've gone through waves of feeling kind of bitter towards women who have had normal pregnancies, and I know that's not healthy or serving me, but I've identified it, tried to move away from it. But it's hard. It's hard when you feel like that why me stuff. So I try and not be the victim in that. The experience has changed me in that it's allowed me to be vulnerable and be brave enough to help others going through something similar. Oftentimes we feel alone and we feel like it's our fault. So being able to share in that experience with someone else has been an unexpected highlight for me, because I know what they're feeling, and I think it's important to acknowledge it and say that it's sad, but it's going to be okay. We don't have to be quiet about it. I know a lot of women kind of are in fear or shame to talk about it, and we don't have to feel that way. So that's something that I've learned, is that, it's okay to talk about.
Totally. That's awesome. We appreciate you talking about it. Last question as we wrap up. What advice would you give someone walking through what you walked through? Either literally walking through it right now, or trying to get pregnant again, or fearing that it's going to happen. Any of those scenarios?
Sure. Well, like I just said, don't feel ashamed or like you did anything wrong. That was something I fixated on for a long time, and that's never gonna be resolved for you. Like you're never gonna feel, oh, suddenly I feel like it's not my fault. But with time and by talking to people, you start to understand that it isn't something that you did. It's so common and it's not your fault. So like, just let go of that thought as soon as you can. Another thing that I kind of learned that helped me is, just because you had one miscarriage does not make you more likely to have another miscarriage, statistically speaking.
That's good to know.
After you've had multiple ones, the statistics do start to skew a little bit, not in your favor. But one isolated miscarriage for an otherwise healthy person does not give you any inclination that you would have trouble later on. So that was really reassuring for me. And talk to people you confide in, or if you're like me, talk to strangers. I actually had a girl on Facebook, I don't know her at all, and she had posted like, oh, I'm celebrating my rainbow baby's 2nd birthday or something. And I sent her a message right then and there, and I said, this might be weird, but did you have a rainbow theme party because you had a miscarriage, or is it just a rainbow party? And she was like, oh, like, it totally was. She was my rainbow baby. And I said, I just had a miscarriage and I don't know who to talk to. And this stranger from the internet was so sympathetic, so nice to talk to. And I really feel closer to her, having never met her, having never really talked outside of that. But it made me feel so much better to talk and not hold it in, because it won't get better if you hold it in, right?
Totally.
And then the last things that I could think of that my advice would be, not as an expert, is to take care of yourself physically and mentally. Don't let this thing be something that just drains your soul, because it easily can. You have to pick yourself back up, because it's worth it to not just sit and let yourself feel like a failure because you didn't fail at anything, And there's no limit on how long you can grieve. So take however much time it takes for you to feel good. It's a very traumatic experience. And I think a lot of people are like, well, so it was a week that you were pregnant. You can probably get over it in a week. Like when you're breaking up with someone, you dated them for 6 months, so grieve it for 3 months. No, sometimes it takes a long time, and that's totally okay. But it's not okay to let it stop you dead in your tracks. So that's my last piece of advice.
Is there anything that the people who have not walked through this should not or should say? What were things that people said to you that was like, don't say that? Like when you're grieving things, there's like no things and yes things that are helpful.
When you're grieving anything, just say you're really sorry. Like, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry that happened to you. Do you want to talk about it? Don't say anything to minimize their experience. And that really pissed me off. So don't have anybody say like, well, it wasn't very long, so at least you're going to be fine. You couldn't
Right.
have planned that much. It was such a short amount of time. Don't say any of that stuff.
Sure.
So that's
Helpful.
basically it.
Kind of
Yeah.
like when you're pregnant, no one wants to hear, "Oh, you look so big," or "Is there twins in there?" Like all stupid things.
Yeah. Just don't say anything stupid. If you're
Yep.
unsure, don't say anything and just say, I'm here if you need me. Like, for real.
That's funny. I appreciate you guys in the comments who are sharing your stories and
Totally.
being vulnerable as well. I know that vulnerability begets more vulnerability, and it helps to not feel like you're the only one standing out there on the limb, huh, Whit? Again, I feel like at least half of you watching today, like, reported having some sort of a miscarriage. Probably maybe you were watching because we said that's what this was going to be about.
Yeah, maybe.
That might skew the numbers, but thank you guys. Thank you, Whit, for being willing. This was obviously my idea and not Whit's. So I think it's powerful. I hope it was helpful for you guys to just feel good about what Whit shared. Not good, but related to or relatable. You are not alone. That is the message. Again, this is What Do We Know? With One and Wet. We only know what we've walked through. We only know what we've learned so far. We're glad to learn from each other and from you guys. Please pop topics in the comments that you want us to talk about. You can find our YouTube channel if you go to YouTube and search what's the word?
Ampersand. Ampersand.
Aspartame. Wit. When and sign Wit. That's what you need to search on YouTube. And next week, we're actually going to be we're going to lighten it up a bit. And we're going to talk about traveling with kids, tips and tricks, whether you're going abroad, passports needed, airplane travel, road trip travel. We've done it all between the two of us. And I feel like this is actually something I know a lot about. So we're excited to come back to you next week and chat about that. Drop your comments on what we should talk about also. Have a good day. Have a good rest of your week. Happy fall.
Bye, guys.
Bye.